Hello, I am Councillor David Boyes, Chair of this committee. Welcome to the remote meeting of the Safe and Stronger Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee taking place today on the 20th of November 2020, which is being recorded live to the Council's website and will be available to be viewed for a minimum of 6 months. Please be aware that any footage from the meeting can be used in subsequent media broadcasts. I would like to give a warm welcome to member officers and any members of the public or media who are watching this live feed of the meeting. Before I commence with the formal business on the agenda, I would like to cover some of the housekeeping issues for us all to follow. All participants must mute their microphone, blur their background where possible. To speak, use the chat function on the right-hand side, type RTS, request to speak. Remember, everyone in the meeting can see the messages in that chat function. When invited to speak by me, remember to unmute your microphone. Once invited to speak, please introduce yourself with your name and position, unless you have already introduced yourself earlier in the meeting. If you are having issues with connectivity, try switching off your video and just use the telephone function. If connectivity issues continue, you may have to leave the meeting and rejoin to get a better signal. If my connection is lost, then Vice Chair Councillor Heather Little will take over until my connection is restored. Okay, so if we can go to the agenda. Have we got any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillors Maitland, Maven and Christine Wilson, and co-opted members Mr Balls, Mr Cook and Chief Fire Officer Errington. That's
noted. Do we have any substitute members?
There are no substitute members today, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so if we can go to the agenda, and we'll go for the minutes that was held on the 22nd of September this year. So I'll go through them for matters accuracy or any matters arising. We'll go to page 3. Page 4, which had item 6, domestic abuse and sexual violence. Page 5, page 6. Page 7, which included the Safe Durham Partnership Board. Page 8. Page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13 and page 14. Nothing that's been forward. Did you say you had something, Jonathan?
Morning, Chair. Jonathan Slay, Overview and Scrutiny Officer. Just advise members in relation to item 7 for the Safe Durham Partnership Board, which is on pages 7 to 13 of the agenda pack. Comments from that presentation were submitted to the Safe Durham Partnership Board, and the board will send a response back to the committee, which will be circulated. Thanks, Chair.
Right, thanks, Jonathan. Okay, with that we'll go to item 4, declarations of interest of any. Nothing being submitted. Item 5, any items from co-opted members or interested parties. Well, I don't think we have any co-opted members. Right, item 6, and this is the community protection update. And this is going to be presented by Joanne Waller, who is Head of Community Protection Services. Okay, Joanne.
Morning, Chair. Morning, everybody. Joanne Waller, Head of Community Protection, Durham County Council. I'm just going to share my presentation with you. Just checking everybody can see that.
Yes, that's fine.
So I'll just make that bigger. Okay, so I'm going to provide an update this morning on the development of some new approaches to tackling ASB and other community problems within County Durham. While some of the...
Sorry to interrupt, can you start the slideshow from the beginning?
Yeah.
And that'll be a better picture, thank you.
Does everybody see that?
We've got your initial slide up with your name.
You need to click on slideshow at the top and then start from beginning. from beginning at the top left.
Got you.
That's it.
That better?
No, it hasn't come on. If you try that again, click on slideshow.
I'll just come back into the group and then come out again if that's okay. Does everybody have that?
If you try click on enable editing first, Joanne.
Any better?
That's it. Lovely, thank you.
Sorry about that. So yeah,
Yes.
I'll start again. Yeah, I'm going to provide an update this morning on the development of some new approaches to tackling ASB and other community problems within County Durham. Whilst the Community Protection Service is leading on some of this work, it's very much a partnership approach, and it links directly to the key priorities of the Safe Durham Partnership around safe and connected communities. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview on a number of key developments. One is around the antisocial behaviour strategy, another around developing a place-based multi-agency approach, some details on a new initiative we've embarked on around making every adult matter, and also give a flavour of some work what we've already started around some area-based interventions work. So if I just go straight into the strategy, just to give you an update on where we are with that. I have to say I probably would have hoped to have had a draft strategy to share with you today, but you may be aware that the Community Protection Service is already quite heavily involved in the COVID-19 response. So much of our resource has been focused on responding to the COVID-19 outbreak management and control, as well as the implementation of the health protection regulations, which sort of governs business openings and closures, as well as the lockdown restrictions. So we've had quite a busy time over the last 6 months in dealing with the COVID. However, we still have been doing some background work around this strategy to try and take this forward. So it's not quite there yet. I would hope to come back to the group at a further meeting, just to give you an update on where we are with it. But just to give you an overview of what we intend to do around this work, ideally we'll be looking to develop a profile for County Durham around ASB activity and incidents. So that might be something as part of the strategic approach that we have to update on a regular basis, because that picture will change on quite a regular basis. But what that will do is it'll identify some key priorities for us to focus on as a wider partnership. We would also be looking to give an overview of the local delivery landscape. There are a number of key partners involved in this, in tackling some of these issues, and it's understanding their roles and their responsibilities, but also to identify how we work with each other and how we sort of establish those relationships around joint working, or how we escalate referrals between each of the relevant organisations. I think the key things for this strategic work are really the last two bullet points: is what is it that we're going to do, and actually what do we hope by delivering some of those actions we want to achieve in terms of impacts and outcomes. So much of this work is under development. We are still focused on trying to deliver this. I would hope by the end of the financial year we'll have something in place for us to start to build on. But as I go through this presentation, you'll see some of the new initiatives and approaches that we're developing already. They are going to be piloted in a number of key areas within the county, and part of that work is to evaluate their effectiveness, and hopefully that will then inform what we do in terms of the longer term strategic approach that we're going to develop. So in terms of developing a place-based multi-agency approach, I think it's fair to say as a partnership, multi-agency working isn't anything new, and we've been very successful in our partnership working over the years. I think the difference in this approach is really about it focusing on a specific geographical location. So the development is really about bringing partners together from a broad range of public and voluntary services who have shared interest in tackling problems within a specific geographical location. And quite key to this as well is it's the community is at the heart of everything that we're going to do, and they are seen and recognised as a key partner in that approach. So in terms of working together to restore and redeem and transform local communities and address a variety of community issues and social needs that we're going to be presented with, what we hope to achieve from taking this approach is around building community confidence and restoring social norms in those areas. It's about building evidence as well around the impact of some of those targeted interventions, particularly in the high crime areas that we're going to focus on, just to strengthen the case for any future investment that we might want to bid for, both at local and at national level. Having the community at the heart of the work is really about giving the community a voice and maintaining that regular community conversation is part of the key partnership approach. It's about redesigning and delivering better coordinated services for people experiencing multiple disadvantage and making every adult matter in that particular area. Well, that brings us nicely on to the Making Every Adult Matter initiative. And this is a national initiative involving a coalition of charities, including Clinks, Homeless Link, Mind, amongst a number of others. And the coalition, they work together to support local areas across the country to develop effective, coordinated services that directly improve the lives of people with multiple disadvantage. The Safe Durham Partnership had the opportunity earlier in the year to bid for MEME support. It's their last programme of work that initiative is going to be delivering. And we were successful in putting our expression of interest in for that support. So we've already actually started work on bringing in this programme to some of our place-based and multi-agency work. So the MEMS approach does require a step change in how we deliver local services. And we hope from taking on this work that will strengthen our current partnership arrangements, as well as help us reshape services around the needs of individuals and communities. As I say, it's going to take a bit of boldness and leadership and drive to make sure that there's some challenges going to be ahead of us over the next coming years, because it will challenge the normal way that we would deliver services ordinarily. So the key deliverables from all of this approach, the place-based approach, the linking in the communities, is really about tackling the ASB and the crime, making residents feel safer and reducing demand on the key public services, enabling them to focus more on the more complex crimes that sometimes we don't always get particularly in light of some of the drain on resources that we don't get time to focus on so readily. It's about reduction in burglary, reductions in fear of crime, understanding community needs and ongoing concerns within those localities, and providing a more joined up whole community response to tackling local issues. Part of the work as well is around developing one team approach and an advocacy strategy that would enable multiple agencies to engage with local communities through a single end-to-end sort of point of contact, and ultimately as well restore those that the trust and the confidence that communities and individuals have in the delivery of our public services going forward. So how that looks like in practice at the moment, we are focusing some of these initiatives in a particular area within the county. We're focusing some of this activity around the Horden area at the moment. And just to give you a flavour of some of the work that we've already started in that area, we launched the Safer Streets initiative back in September. That particular initiative, again, was a multi-agency approach. The PCVC office was successful in bidding for some funding earlier in the year to support the scheme, and was successful in achieving £485,000 worth of investment, which is available to us until March 2021. So the purpose of that initiative is around sort of providing a suite of security measures to not only victims of residential burglary in those particular areas, but also a number of cocoon properties which are in close proximity to the target address. And the idea being that not only does that reduce the opportunity for repeat victimisation, but also it's a prevention around further burglaries within that locality. So that scheme's underway at the moment. We are going to be evaluated as part of that initiative from the Home Office. So again, there'll be something to report on at a future meeting in terms of how that has progressed. The CAP programme, I know that the Community Action Team have reported to Overview and Scrutiny in terms of their work programme in previous meetings. The CAP programme are in Horden at the moment. Their scheme launched on October the 12th and will run till the 24th of December. Ordinarily, the CAP then moves out of that locality into another area, and whilst that will happen in this case, what we aim to leave behind is a legacy team, and that will be a multi-agency team that we will establish within that locality. It'll provide a visible presence in the area, and it'll be continuing the work very much around problem solving and tackling some of the issues that may have been identified as part of the initial CAP programme. And then I mentioned making every adult matter and rolling that out. That's a 2-year programme. Again, it'll focus primarily within the Horden area as a starting point. But also a lot of this work, albeit short to medium term interventions at the moment, we hope that will link into some of the medium to longer term interventions which are occurring in that area as well, around empty homes, selective licensing, and some of the master planning exercises that are going on around the county. So the basis for this is very much a pilot. It's about what we can achieve in that area in the short to medium term, and how can that advise the antisocial behaviour strategy going forward. But also the idea being that we will roll out this approach across the county over time, and obviously build on the successes and design out any weaknesses that we have in these schemes as we go forward. More than happy to come back to the committee at a future date just to give you an update on what we've achieved, whether it's during the programme itself or at the end of some of these initiatives, just to give members an oversight on what we've managed to achieve in terms of impacts and outcomes as part of this work. So I'll leave it there for now, but is there any questions?
Right, thanks very much for that, Joanne. I've got a couple of questions, but I'll bring in members of the committee first. So does anybody want to speak? If you can use the RTS. You put your hand up, Brian, but can you try and use the RTS as well? But I'll bring you in first, Brian.
All right, thank you, David. Yes, I was very interested to hear that once the CAT team leave the area, you've got this multi-agency team going to be left in. I don't know for how long, but that is a very good move, that, because I found in Ferry Hill that once the CAT team leaves, we very quickly revert to the old badness of the area, and it'd be nice to have a team there to progress what the CAT team have done and keep things moving. So more or less, if you could, are they there permanently after that, or is it just so long? But I welcome it anyway.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Avery. Yeah, it is. I think the CAT team, it is time limited project. It's 8 to 10 weeks normally, and I think that's been one of the challenges we've had with it. We've actually been able to deliver quite a lot during the weeks of action, but what we found is we're having to go back to those areas again because they've actually gone back to some of the issues that, and presented some of the problems that we sort of had at the outset. So whilst the CAT programme, I think, still got a place in terms of the whole county-wide approach, it is about trying to empower communities to take action for themselves. But I think in some of the areas that you've mentioned there, which are our sort of, our harder to sort of tackle issues, really, we do need that long-term visible presence. And I think that's what we're finding now. And I think this is where the challenge is going to come from, around reshaping and redesigning how we deliver services. And it may be that if we can, in terms of what we're going to try and do in Horden, if we can show and demonstrate that that process works, that's a model to go forward for the rest of the county. But it will need to obviously have some resource investment in that, because we're obviously all a bit stretched at the moment in terms of the size of our and capacity within our teams. But hopefully this is a good starting point to see if actually this really works, or it needs to be, developed in a different way. But it's a starting point.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, that's something we can all watch closely if we are going to get the opportunity to roll things out around the rest of the county. Anything that's happening in Horden at the moment, then we can sort of benefit from it as well. Okay, I've got Councillor Beattie and Councillor Stevenson, so we'll take Alison first.
Councillor Alison Beattie, Pelton Division. Thank you, Joanne, for that presentation. There's a lot of reassurances in it, because with one of the villages in our ward being very problematic, I don't need to mention any names, I can see this as being a really good opportunity. To that extent, I'm more than willing to put that village up as another case study to actually test some of these policies and procedures out, if that's actually possible to do. Linked to that, I just wondered how much dialogue's actually taken place with the police on this as well, because I've literally just this week had conversations with our police team, touching on a lot of initiatives where I can very definitely see crossover in some of the things that you're talking about, which is why it might be pertinent to sort of consider that as one of the other locations, because of lots of problems with antisocial behaviour, reputational value, sort of. We have had the CAT team in twice now. We have had the multi-agency approach. It's literally clutching at straws now. So a lot of reassurances in that presentation. And yes, please, we'll have it next. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Beattie. Yeah, just to sort of come back to you on the police engagement, they're very much involved in the discussions up to now. I mean, we've been talking about this probably, you know, certainly for the last few months. We have just, I maybe should mention at this point, we are looking at developing some governance around this work. So ideally, we're going to have a higher level steering group which will oversee the projects that are going on in the Horden area. And equally, we would report that through to yourselves as a committee, as well as to the Safe Durham Partnership. But we also have an operational group reporting to the strategic group as well. We've got obviously so many strands to this. We've got the Safer Streets Initiative, we've got memes, as well as the whole operational approach around problem solving. So we are pulling all of that together into some sort of governance arrangement. And obviously quite key to this is making sure that we attract as much partner engagement in this as we possibly can, as well as the community. So, you know, I think this is very much early stages around what we can achieve. I think for us, certainly by January, we would hope to have this one team in place in Horden itself as a starting point, but who knows how many other partners might join this approach over the coming months and possibly years. And I think the more the merrier, really. And I think, as you say, there's probably a number of other areas within the county which will be lining up to say, if this works here, or even elements of it work there, can we have a little bit in our area too? So you're not the first person to offer up an area, to be honest, and I think there will be a queue, but it is about making sure that we resource it properly as well. So if we are going to roll this out, we need to have the capacity there to deliver on what we say we're going to deliver.
Okay, and I think for me the operative word there was community, because you're going to need community buy-in, because once the team's left, it's the community who's got to live with the consequences. So I think it's important, if there are steering groups that are going to sort of direct operations, that you do have members of the community in there. Okay, I've got Councillor Stevenson and Councillor Crute. So Jeanette, Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah. Jeanette Stevenson, the member for Anfield Plain, New Cayo, Catchgate area. Again, very, very welcome news. Very much like Alison, I too have quite a problematic area in the New Cayo area where the CAT team have been in a couple of times again. But my point is about sort of multi-area problem solving teams already in place in neighbourhood services. You know, how it's about the joined upness of all of this, and how are we going to make sure that we're not duplicating effort through our neighbourhood wardens. In my area, we have a very active town council, which I'm a member of, and we have additional funds going into our own neighbourhood wardens for the area. So I'm just concerned that we make sure that everyone in the areas are totally involved in this, and again, going back to David's point, you know, we have to get the community engaged in this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Stevens. And just to sort of reiterate that point around the broader partnership, this is about establishing one team. So it's not about one team within community protection, it's about bringing in the wardens, it's bringing in the neighbourhood policing teams, it's linking in with the fire services, but quite key as well is, like I say, the community being a key partner in this, but also some of the voluntary services as well. And it's all about not duplicating effort and having a seamless sort of one single point of contact, keeping those conversations going so that people don't have to go to 4 or 5 forums to get their messages across. It's seen as a really joined up approach. Yeah. I'm not saying it's going to be easy to achieve overnight, because it will require some change in how we deliver services. But obviously the quicker we get this up and running with some of the core partners, I think there's more buy-in from other agencies as well will follow. Yeah. So absolutely that we will take that on board in terms of making sure it's all streamlined and that we're not leaving anybody out at a limb.
That's really good to hear, because you know what I'm hearing on the ground from the police is that MAPS doesn't work anymore. And you know, I welcome again the fact that there's going to be something overarching that's going to be tackling antisocial behaviour and bringing all of these elements together. That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Jeanette. Okay, Councillor Crute.
Thank you, Chair. Rob Crute from the Blackhall Ward. Just a few words of endorsement for most of the comments that have been made before and for the Community Action Team process. Although the period that the Community Action Team are in the village is the integral part of it, I think one of the most important parts is the time before then, the lead-in time, which we used in Blackhall, that were in Blackhall just recently, used that lead-in time to promote the scheme so that the community was ready when they came in. And critically, whilst the community action team were in there, we did one or two things locally to more or less form an exit strategy. Now, that's been supported by groundwork. You know, they've come in to do this legacy, as you call it, Joanne. But while the community action team were in there, we've set up a permanent litter picking group, which is on permanent standby at the moment, by the way, because of the COVID-19 restrictions. But we also set up a residents association as well to continue the work that we'd established in the community action team. And we're also running regular walkabouts in the village. My ward is very much the same as parts of Brian Avery's ward, Alison Beatty's ward, and your ward, David, in that we have a lot of former colliery housing stock, and a lot of the main problems were secondary fires in the backyards and rubbish arson in the rear yards. It was a huge problem. We've got on top of that now, but we realise that there's no point in putting that right for 10 weeks only for it to go back again to where it was before 10 days' time. So those walkabouts, we have the PCSO there, the MB Homes officer, local councillors, of course, the parish clerk. They're all, you know, socially distanced as well for the record. And we found that an integral part of what the community action team is about. It's not just about that period that they're in the village, it's what you do afterwards to sustain the impact of the community action team. I know that sounds fairly simple and it's not always as straightforward as you think it is, but I think, I can't remember who said it before, if you don't have community buy-in, it's going to fail. That's the critical part of it. You get the community to come in with you, and in effect you have the community policing their own communities, and that's the way to work. But just a final word to support the role of the community action team. It's an absolutely excellent initiative. We've had them a couple of times in Blackhall. We learned from the experience the first time. Hope we've got it right the second time. Time will tell. But if you've got the community action team coming into your village anytime soon, embrace the opportunity, make the best of it you can, and bring the people on with you. So thanks, Joanne, and hope we pass on my thanks to the community action team.
Thanks very much, Councillor Crute.
Okay, I'm anybody else down to speak? I think my issue is, other than these community action teams, it's been very, very difficult because we haven't been able to have the packed meetings, we haven't been able to have our councillor surgeries in the same way. I suppose people feel a little bit alienated, and they feel as though they're not getting to see the police as a visible presence on the street. And we do have some excellent PCSOs in Easington, and I suppose it's just reassuring the communities at large that there is still work going on in the background. And you know, we've got tremendous issues at the moment with people on off-road bikes, and the community just see these people just getting away. It's mainly young boys, lads on there and bikes riding around with impunity at the moment because they don't see the police tackling the issue. We say that they are doing things in the background we might not see, but it's always reassuring when you do see the police or the wardens or PCSOs, and obviously the last 9-10 months we haven't seen as much of that. Okay, with that, I'll just quickly summarise. I think Brian mentioned about the legacy team afterwards, that that's an important role. Alison Beatty said reassurances about and dialogue with the police is essential. Councillor Stevenson welcomed the initiative and that it was joined up approach and it wasn't duplication. And Councillor Crute just said the lead in and the exit strategy is just as important as the work that's going on the ground at the time. So thanks very much for that, Joanne. You did say you'll come back and give us an update as things develop. So thanks very much. I know you've got other things to do, so thanks for attending the meeting. Okay, with that, we'll go to item 7, which is on the Public Protection Service, and Owen Clough, who's the manager of this service, will give this presentation. Okay, over to you, Owen.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm Owen Clough. I'm the Public Protection Manager. I'll just try and share my screen at the moment so I can go through the presentation.
And can we remind members, everybody else, not to touch that square with the arrow on in the background, please.
Can everyone see that?
No, I can't see anything yet. Is
there nothing on there?
No, still not.
Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can see that now, Owen.
Oh, sorry about that, Chair.
Okay.
Thanks for your time again, councillors. Ordinarily, I would do an update on the enforcement and intervention services from the public protection team, which I'm happy to do again today. What I would probably say is it's not going to be the usual sort of content of the presentation that we normally have, because as Joanne mentioned previously, a lot of our staff has been involved in the COVID response, so it'll focus a lot on our intervention activities in relation to the regulations and restrictions that have applied. Just going back to the initial team for public protection, just to run through for members who are unaware, there's 4 service teams in my service area, one of which is licensing, which includes obviously the enforcement administration of lots of local authority licensing regimes, taxis, private hire, pubs, clubs, off licenses, scrap metals, street trading and the like. We've had a newly formed neighbourhood interventions team that came into my service this year. That includes the antisocial behaviour team, the nuisance action team that deal with sort of noise and nuisances, and the community action team are in there too. The trading standards service obviously relates to the business compliance and the special investigations teams that we've set up, and the new safer communities teams, which are make up the GRTS service, the VIP service, and as well as the community safety officers who deal with the MAPS process. I'll not touch too much on what their sort of interventions have been in the last sort of 6 to 8 months, and a lot of the things I'll talk about doesn't just include the public protection teams, it actually includes all of the community protection staff as well. The main focus of our work really has been around the lockdown restrictions and the local restrictions that have existed since March. What we saw early on, obviously, when the lockdown came in, was business closures. A lot of people thought that was quite straightforward and that all businesses had to close, and obviously that wasn't the case. Over this time, we had a very, very busy period. Lots of inquiries from members of the public, lots of inquiries from employees about whether businesses could or should stay open, and in fact the sort of activities that they would do when they were open as well. Largely it was around sort of essential retail that were still allowed to open, but other businesses were too. And I think it's probably fair to say that an awful lot of residents and indeed businesses were unsure about what the restrictions were, whether they were allowed to trade, whether they were allowed to go to work. So there was an awful lot of work around dealing with those inquiries. As I say, it was incredibly busy during that time. We had to spread an awful lot of that work out amongst the teams. During that time, we did an awful lot of COVID compliance work with those businesses that were open, giving them advice, giving them guidance, mainly around sort of health and safety at work, but as well as whatever guidance came from the government around that. We had to move on, unfortunately, to enforcement. There were certain businesses that tried to sort of flout the rules, and obviously in the current climate, we felt it essential that if those businesses were looking to stay open, that we had to issue the prohibitions that were available to us in the legislation. Again, that very much wasn't our first approach. We did want to work with businesses, but there was some that looked at potential sort of loopholes in that, claiming they were essential retailers, and that would give them a commercial advantage. And again, the main priority for us was about the sort of transmission of the disease. So what we tried to do, we had to make some tough enforcement decisions, and we had to issue prohibitions to certain businesses during that time. Again, moving down to business advice, I would stress with us, enforcement very much wasn't our first option with any of this. We did look to give advice to business where we could. Again, during this period, we had over 220 requests for business advice as to what options could be available to them, what advice they would have, how they would keep trading. And I think that moved on to a lot of businesses looking to diversify, which was pleasing, so that would continue to trade things around click and collect service, things around takeaways, things around deliveries. So it was a really tough period for an awful lot of people during that time. And we had to sort of keep on top of the legislation and be flexible about our approach in this, because at the meantime we had to balance supporting the businesses where we could, but indeed where those businesses seemed to sort of flout the law, we had to take appropriate action. When the restrictions lifted in July, obviously the main priority or the main concern seemed to be around sort of pubs and clubs and the like, mainly because they would be the places that would gather lots of people. Our licensing enforcement team went out for the first few weekends after the restrictions were lifted. There was new guidance and there was new guidance to the hospitality and leisure industry. We did over 70 visits over the first 4 weekends, and we started to really work with the businesses to understand a little bit what they could be doing. I think at this point there was an element of confusion potentially amongst the members of the public and possibly amongst the licensed trade as well, because a lot of the media reports suggested that there were rules which suggested that a lot of it was law, a lot of it wasn't, much of it was guidance. But again, we wanted to work with all of the premises to make sure that they could open safely and they weren't posing any undue risks to visitors. Amongst that as well, we managed to sign off what we call our noise protocol, which was specifically to Durham City, which is a joined up approach of how we deal with things around house parties. During when the period leading up to the restrictions being lifted, there was concerns that people possibly wouldn't go to pubs, maybe it's because the restrictions are allowed and there'd possibly more house parties. That was possibly the case, but we looked to carry on and we developed a protocol with the university and with the police as to how we will deal with those issues there, specifically in Durham City. Again, the compliance inquiry still carried on. There was an element of probably confusion from certain members of the public and again businesses about what the rules are, what the regulations were, what was guidance, what wasn't. Equally about people who were having to go to work, and there was concerns about what sort of measures were in place for those to protect workers when they actually did have to go to work. So it's still an incredibly busy period for us all. It didn't change once some of those restrictions went. We then moved into the North East restrictions, which did give specific offences and requirements on pubs, bars, restaurants and the like. So to a certain extent, it clarified an awful lot of the guidance that then did make it law. For the first few weekends after that, we had a significant out of our presence over the first 4 weekends. We made over 800 visits during that time, mainly around the nighttime economy. We had support from the police around that. But there was an awful lot of work gone into it. We did issue an awful lot of guidance. I'm very pleased to say that the vast majority of businesses in County Durham were doing their utmost to try and comply with the legislation and the guidance. Very difficult time, and they had to do an awful lot of work themselves to make sure that they were kind of COVID safe. And we worked an awful lot with businesses during that time, and obviously assisting members of the public because they still made inquiries into the service to see whether certain practices were lawful or not. The two main sort of sanctions that were given to us under the legislation then, one was a directions notice. And members may well have seen some of the directions notices that we've issued during that time. They were for premises where we felt as if the management of the business had essentially failed or they hadn't done as much as they could have done. And it was for a variety of reasons that we had to issue those directions notices, mainly around things around no table service, no social distancing, possibly apparent mingling between households, and the general sort of conduct that we saw and the behaviours that we saw in those premises. We had to issue directions notices. What I would stress though is that they weren't just our decisions alone. Obviously our proposals for directions notices were supported by the police and the Director of Public Health, because we had to follow a consultation period throughout that time to make sure that they agreed with us and that we felt at the time that there was a serious and imminent risk of public health if those businesses continued to trade the way they were. We also had fixed penalty notices. That was a fairly new thing that we were given powers for. There was 3 main offences around that, and they centred mainly around pubs and the hospitality sector, around no table service, around the test and trace requirements, and around the 10 o'clock curfew. So again, a lot of the visits that we had focused around those. We have had to issue a few fixed penalty notices over that time, but we're hoping to make sure that we get compliance after that. We've now moved into lockdown 2, as I've referred to it there, and at the time of doing the presentation, obviously we've done a couple of prohibitions on some businesses during this time. We still get a number of inquiries from businesses either asking if they can trade, how they can potentially adapt their businesses to make sure that they can trade safely, and again from members of the public in relation to allegations of businesses to continue to trade when they shouldn't be. Just going back to what I would describe as our trends and the business as usual, obviously the 4 service teams are all front facing. They're very, very busy service teams. And I'll just give you a few sort of sound bites that have been going on, as well as the sort of COVID response that we've had to manage. Noise and ASB complaints have still continued to come in. During the first lockdown period, we had over 1,550 statutory noise complaints. Now that could well be as a result of people being in the houses when perhaps they wouldn't ordinarily be there and noticing a lot more than they would if they'd been at work or at school. Things around sort of garden parties, barbecues have continued. So the spike that we normally get in noise complaints in the summer was very much shifted earlier. In terms of ASB complaints, they've continued. We did at the start of this had an agreement with the police that we would send out ASB warning letters for apparent COVID breaches that were identified. We did over 270 letters during the first lockdown period of that, as well as continuing with our business as usual sort of response to ASB matters. On the trading standards side of things, we have seen a rise in certain types of complaints, mainly around home improvements. And again, I suppose a lot of people this year have possibly invested money or some of the time in home improvements, so we've seen a rise in those type of complaints. We've also seen a rise in what we've described as tap house intelligence, where members have reported to members in the past about sales of illicit tobacco from houses. We've seen a rise in the information that we're getting through around that. And again, that's possibly as a result of individuals being more at home. And again, we've had problems with puppy sellers in the past in the county. We've got a lot of legitimate sellers, but we've got some who aren't and who flout the legislation. And we've seen a rise in those complaints too. But again, that's possibly a reflection of the local restrictions we've been under. We have continued to take some of our cases through the court and through our committee process. So our enforcement has continued throughout this time. As people would probably understand, the court process is a little bit delayed at the moment. But we're still managing to get some of our cases through, so our big thanks to our colleagues in legal for assisting with that. As Joanne's just mentioned, that the CAT team is continuing. It's continued. We've had to revise some of our delivery models around that, and particularly around the kind of consultation, because we couldn't do any sort of face-to-face stuff. So we're looking to see how that develops, but I won't dwell too much on that because we've kind of covered their successes. The community safety initiatives have continued as well. We still do the MAPS process. I take Councillor Stevenson's point in relation to the MAPS process. We're looking to revise that process. We're looking to make it a bit more streamlined and a bit more efficient. I'm not saying that it doesn't do its job now, it does, but we're looking to improve that. We've also had a number of unauthorised encampments in the county. We didn't open our temporary stopover sites this year for reasons of not encouraging travel. And for reasons of people moving around the county, as well as mixing between households, but that has resulted in a number of unauthorised encampments that we've had to address. I think what I would probably say is we look to assist businesses wherever possible during this time. We haven't looked to give them any kind of extra burdens or anything like that. We do try to help them. We do try to give them the advice. And I think it's been welcomed in some quarters, and as I say, we're pleased to see we've seen a high level of compliance of businesses during this time. Before I open up the question, I would like to sort of take this opportunity to give a huge thank you to the community protection staff. The staff have been doing their day job as well as, which is a very busy thing, as well as been doing the COVID response. And I think they've shown an awful lot of resilience, determination and flexibility in doing that, and it hasn't been easy for them. So thank you very much. Happy to take questions.
Well, on behalf of the committee, I'd like to second that as well. So, okay, thanks very much for that, Owen, and very, very challenging times, as you alluded to. So, who we've got first? We've got Councillor Stevenson. Do you want to come in?
Thank you very much. And again, add our thanks to the thanks that you've just given there, Owen, and I appreciate the team must have been really, really busy after that presentation. The only thing I would make a plea about is I had complaints in my area, which I forwarded to yourself, and I never heard another squeak. So I just would ask, can we be informed when things have actually been done, what was done? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Stevenson. Absolutely, I can only apologise for that. I don't know the specific inquiries you've referred to, but certainly, yes, we'll feed that back to the team. You should have got feedback. As I say, I can only say that was an oversight, and we possibly dealt with the inquiries and perhaps felt as if we didn't need the feedback, but we should have done, and I can only apologise for that.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions on. One is regards to something that was in the press lately with regard to unpaid fines. We seem to be quite high with regards to the unpaid fines due to COVID. Can you respond to that?
I think I've seen something in the local media in relation to those that have been issued by the police. We have issued a number of FPNs from the local authority, and we will pursue them. There is a period of time whereby it gives a period for the business or the individual to pay those fines. And there's also appeal mechanisms in there as well. So a lot of the individuals that we've issued FPNs to have appealed those, so we have to consider them as well. We will look to recoup all of the fine money that we get though, and we are in contact with finance as to whether we can get whether the FPNs that we've issued have been paid or not. But we will look to recover that money. Yes.
Right. Okay. And my second question is, how did we fare compared to other authorities in the region and other like-size authorities with regards to enforcement action, and in particular licensed premises closures?
Well, it's in some respects a tough question to answer because the comparison isn't quite the same, because obviously County Durham's a lot bigger than many of the sort of neighbouring authorities. I believe we've issued more directions notices than any other local authority in the North East. We have been particularly active during that time. We made a conscious decision that certainly when the sort of North East restrictions came in and the pubs were allowed to open, that we felt as if we had to have a significant presence over the weekends, over the night times, and I think we did that. I think we've probably done more than any other authority in the North East, certainly with our visible presence and the directions notices and the FPNs. That's not to say we had a particular problem in Durham, because I think it's all relative in terms of the sort of size of the county and the number of premises that we've got. But we did find a number of premises that we had to issue directions notices to. They were on the website, and I think certainly from our looking at the website and contact with our colleagues in the North East, I think we've done a lot more on that front. I think we've been a bit more proactive. Okay.
Did you want to come in on that, Joanne?
Yeah, if I could just add as well, Councillor Boyce, that obviously all of the activity we've done up to now has been within our existing resource in terms of the capacity we've got within the service, and I think we've been very targeted with that in response to some of the legislation we've had. But just to sort of give you a bit of assurance going forward as well, some of that, obviously the effort that we've been putting in from the staff isn't sustainable in the long term without some investment in capacity, and we've been fortunate to get that approval to go ahead and increase our capacity. So as of, I think it was just yesterday, we've finalised out some recent recruitment exercises, and we're looking to have a compliance team set up by the end of this month, which is just going to enhance the existing resource we've got and enable us to do a lot more as we go forward. And that includes, it'll be 3 area teams. We're going to have around about 20 additional officers coming into the service to help us deliver some of this work. So what we've already achieved, certainly in the work that we did out of hours in October, which is people were working Monday to Friday, but then we were having them out on a weekend till 12 o'clock as well. We're now going to have a team who are going to be available to work until midnight, 7 days. So hopefully those resources will be in place in the next week or two, and certainly in advance of any decision around coming out of lockdown in the 2nd of December. So it's good news for us that we're going to get some sustainable resource coming into the service to help us achieve some of this.
That is welcome. Thanks very much for that, Joanne. I haven't been notified of any other people wishing to speak, so I'll just quickly summarise again. So Councillor Stevenson put a plea in the councillors be informed of any enforcement activities when they've notified you. I mentioned about unpaid fines and how we compared to other authorities with regards to enforcement, and Joanne's just come in with a welcome increase in capacity, which is going to enhance the team's activities. Okay, so thanks very much for your report, Owen. Hopefully we'll get another update from you. I think the recommendation, Jonathan, if I'm right, is we just note this report. We note the contents of the report and comment accordingly, which we have done, and we did on the last one with Joanne. So thanks very much. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you've got other things to do. We'll see you again next meeting, Joanne. Okay. Right. With that, we go to item 8 on the agenda, which is the County Durham Youth Service Annual Performance Report. And this is going to be presented by Martin Stenton, Head of Early Help, Inclusion and Vulnerable Children, and Dave Summers, Youth Justice Service Manager, who's going to present this report. Okay, over to you guys.
Thank you very much, Chair. As you've just heard, I'm Dave Summers, Youth Justice Service Manager, and I'm joined by Martin Stenton, who is the Head of Early Help, Inclusion and Vulnerable Children, and my boss, to present the report. There's 2 documents that you should have available to you. One's a covering report, and the other document is the the annual Youth Justice report, which I'm going to talk about now. Members may recall that normally there's a statutory requirement on the local authority to produce a youth justice plan, and that's usually a requirement of the Youth Justice Board in order for us to receive the grant that we receive from them. However, this year, obviously, it's not been normal course of events, and the requirement to provide a youth justice plan was removed by the Youth Justice Board as a result of the Youth Justice Board's attempt to ease the burden, if you like, on local authorities and youth offending services, youth justice services for this year in order for us to be able to concentrate on our response to the COVID restrictions. What the Management Board, who oversee the work of the Youth Justice Service, what the Management Board wanted to do was to maintain appropriate and proper oversight of the work of the service. And so they made a requirement on myself to still produce an annual report, albeit a brief one compared to normal. But also we were keen to ensure that despite all the restrictions that lockdown and the COVID restrictions imposed upon us, we were keen that we still maintained a focus on what we wanted to achieve overall, so the strategic direction of the service. And so alongside the brief annual report, we've also produced a service improvement plan. In terms of the Youth Justice Statutory Required Plan, we'd actually, fortuitously in 2019, last year, produced a 2-year plan for the period 2019 to 2021. And we would normally, after 12 months, just refresh that plan, which is what we've been able to do really in effect at the end of the day anyway. So differently from previous years, the Youth Justice Plan would go to full council for approval. This obviously, because there isn't the statutory requirement for the work that we've done so far, this plan hasn't gone through to full council, and it's here for this committee for information. The key points in terms of the performance of during 2019-2020 was that there was a significant fall in first-time entrants to the youth justice system. These are young people who enter the formal criminal justice system for criminal offences, and that there's been a very low level of use of custody in County Durham. You'll see the third area, which I'll just touch on briefly now in a bit more detail in a moment or two. The third area was the reoffending. So that's the percentage of young people who reoffend once they are sentenced by the court or receive a caution from the police. We have had a dispute or raised some concerns with the Ministry of Justice, who provide the data, in respect of the accuracy of the figures that were reported. And I'll come on to a much more updated and a much more pleasing report as to the latest figures in performance. As I said before, the plan also includes a bit about the services response to the COVID restrictions, which I'll also touch on as well, and then the service improvement plan for the year that we're now in at the moment. In terms of annual performance, first time entrance is the lowest that it's ever been, and it was a 14.6% reduction year on year. There was 213 young people entered the criminal justice system between October 18 and September 19. In years gone by, 10, 12 years ago, that figure was in the thousands, 1,200, 1,200 around that figure. So that's a significant drop. And that is against the national rate of 219 against and a northeast rate of 299. So it's a significant and pleasing performance level. In terms of reoffending, as I mentioned before, there have been some concerns over the data that the Ministry of Justice have produced, which showed a reoffending rate of 51.9%. Now that's not a straightforward, nearly 52% of the young people we work with reoffend. There's complications in terms of how the data is collected anyway, but we felt that that wasn't an accurate reflection, and the Ministry of Justice, who for a while stopped producing data, these reoffending figures, because they needed to concentrate their resources on other parts of government response to the COVID restrictions, have now produced the latest data, and our reoffending figure is now 39.2%, which puts us ahead of the northeast average and in line with the national average. So that's obviously pleasing and a much more up-to-date picture. In terms of the use of custody, again, we've got one of the lowest. It's a 75% reduction year on year, but it's the lowest in the northeast and significantly lower than the national rate as well. That's mirrored as well in terms of remand bed nights. That's the number of nights that young people are remanded to secure accommodation awaiting trial. And there was a 56.6% reduction year on year. That's as well as a positive picture in terms of using the remands to secure accommodation when it's appropriate. It's also a significant saving to the local authority because the cost of holding young people on remand is borne by the local authority. Particularly pleasing is the feedback on the work with victims, including young victims. A statutory responsibility of my service is to work with the victims of youth crime, but also we're funded separately to work with the victims of, the young victims of all crime, including adult crime. And we've engaged in the period 1st of April 19 to 31st of March 20, we've engaged more than 100 victims actually in restorative approaches. That's direct work between the victim and the young person who's committed the offence. And we have worked with 57 young people specifically through a group that they call themselves With Youth in Mind, which is a support group led by young people, young leaders as we refer to them, to provide support for young people who've been victims of crime. Young people who've offended have undertaken over 1,500 hours of unpaid work in communities. I'm sure people have been aware of the kind of things that they've done, and also they've produced items like Christmas wreaths and garden planters, which in normal years we have a stall at County Hall and other places where we sell them. And that enabled us, which was really pleasing, to provide, to donate £1,000 from the sales to the Great North, £500 to the Great North Air Ambulance and £500 to the North East Autism Society. Those were charities that young people themselves chose. In addition, we also provide or produce bling poppies that now we provide direct to the Royal British Legion, and they sell them. They always prove very popular and make significant amounts of money, in the hundreds, for the Royal British Legion every year. As I mentioned previously, we, like every other service, were impacted by the COVID restrictions and lockdown 1 and lockdown 2. what we were determined to do was, obviously we were key workers, and the requirements to supervise young people on sentences in the community and in custody remained. But what we were determined to do was that we were going to continue delivering everything that we delivered previously. What we were going to change was how we delivered the services that we deliver. Pleasing to report, as a result of that approach, we didn't develop any backlogs. All work was delivered as per usual in terms of throughput. We had to be very imaginative in how we worked with some young people and how we did reparation and ensure that that got delivered. So it was things like producing posters at home that could then be used to promote the importance of complying with the restrictions and lockdown and so on. We identified, as we normally do, all those young people who were high risk, either to themselves or to others, and we continued working with them as we would have done pre-lockdown. They were still visited at home, they were still checked on, and they were still worked with as normal. With others who were much lower risk at very early stages of the criminal justice system, having committed not dangerous offences, we worked more remotely with those using video or telephone, but every young person under our supervision received some form of home visit and were monitored throughout the whole of the process. In terms of the service improvement plan going forward, as I said at the start, we wanted to maintain the focus that we have on improving the quality of what we do every year, and just because we were in lockdown and things were difficult at the moment, we felt that we needed to maintain that and not lose that focus, just dealing with the sort of things that were in front of us, immediate issues that we needed to deal with. So we continued to improve the interventions that we complete with young people. We needed to develop a suite of interventions that could be delivered remotely, so that was a huge piece of work that we have managed to achieve and continue to try and improve. Ongoing with every other year, we try to improve the quality of our assessments and the plans and the intervention plans that we develop for young people to try and prevent offending, and the feedback and the data that we collect would show that we're being relatively successful in that sphere. We continue to target our resources on those young people committing the most offences and the most serious offences. So we have what we refer to as our reoffending cohort, that receive an enhanced level of service and enhanced levels of resources committed to those young people to try and make the greatest difference to communities. It's important that we listen to what young people tell us, and we change our services and the way that we deliver things depending on what they tell us. During lockdown, we undertook 2 surveys. One was in respect of staff, to get feedback of how they found the different ways of working and what we could learn from that, but also from young people and their parents and carers, to tell us how they experienced the changing services the changing way that we delivered our services during lockdown. And it was really pleasing to report that it was very positive. The feedback was, with only 1 or 2 exceptions, and we had a really good response rate. With only 1 or 2 exceptions, it was entirely positive, both from staff and from young people and their parents and carers. Obviously recognising that everything was difficult for everybody, but they felt that both the level of risk management and support that we delivered was appropriate and helpful. We want to continue to develop our work with victims and make sure that we retain our focus on victims as well as the young people who commit the offences. We want to ensure that volunteering remains central to what we do, both community members being volunteers working with this service on a statutory level. There is a requirement that we have certain volunteers to undertake certain tasks by statute, but also opportunities for volunteers to work on a mentoring level with young people that we work with. But also key to that is volunteering opportunities for the young people that we're working with, to try and promote volunteering in communities and with other people less fortunate as a means of helping young people develop some kind of social responsibility. And then last but not least, in terms of our service improvement plan, top quality frontline staff need to have top quality supports in place, both in terms of the management structure, the databases that we use, and improving the quality of the work undertaken by the support staff that support the frontline staff. That's it in a nutshell, and obviously, as ever, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Has everybody else got their mics? Because I'm getting some feedback coming back here. Has everybody got their mics on mute? Hello? No, it's still coming back. Can you turn? There, it's gone off now. Okay, thanks very much for that, Dave. That very interesting, comprehensive report. Can I just go back to the reoffending rate, because that's a massive difference. 51.9 down to, they say, about 39%. That's a massive difference in the numbers. And do other agencies, have they been able to get these new updated figures? Because I know the Police and Crime Commissioner and his team, they were very, very concerned about that reoffending rate, and they're going to do a major piece of work on the back of it. So has this information been shared with other agencies that it isn't 51.9% and it's actually only 39.3%?
Thank you, Chair. It could be me that caused the feedback problem, by the way, because you said it disappeared when I turned my microphone off, so apologies if it continues. The figures I've just given you is very much hot off the press. They will be shared. They're always shared widely once we have got the final approved version from the Ministry of Justice and the Youth Justice Board that we can share. So I'm trying to, I just tried to give the committee a very hot off the press kind of information. There's a big difference. Yes, there is. We always felt that our performance was around the figures, the new figures that we've got, around the 40% mark. That, just to be clear, that doesn't mean, as I said, that 40% of young people have reoffended. It's a bit difficult to explain. Basically, it's looked at every quarter. So if one young person commits a further offence in each quarter of a year, they will count 4 times in that year. So they'll count as 4 people reoffending. I don't understand why, to be honest, but that's the way that the Ministry of Justice have decided to do it. It's still, at the end of the day, that figure is still 39.2%, and whilst it's much more pleasing than the official figure that was being reported that we never felt was accurate, there's still obviously a lot of work that needs to be done to bring that down. We'd like to see it at 0 in the ideal world. We're unlikely to ever achieve that, but we certainly want to see it a lot less. So we work very closely with the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. We work very closely with the police. They're one of our statutory partners and on our management board. And all the stuff that we develop is done in partnership with the police and Police Crime Commissioner and a whole range of other agencies.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's just a big divergence in the official figure to what the latest figure you've been given, because the latest figure is a lot closer to the national rate, and we're between the national rate and the North East rate, whereas the other figure. So are you saying the national rate and the North East rate, they could be wrong as well now? Or is it just the one for Durham?
The national rate has gone up slightly from what you see there, from what was in the report, and the North East figure has also gone up. So whilst we've come down considerably, they've increased. The national average and the regional average has increased. So our performance has gone from poor, very poor compared to other people, to well, the reported performance has gone from very poor compared to other services to one of the top performing areas. That's
very useful. Martin, did you want to come on in this particular point?
Yes, thank you. So I think overall we were pleased with most of the performance across most areas of what the Youth Justice Service were doing, but the reoffending figures really stuck out, and that's partly why the commentary took place with the Ministry of Justice. It tracks reoffending 2 years from 2 years ago, so it's sort of out of date to a degree anyway. But the figures that Dave's referred to that were published nationally last week do show that we're probably more in line with where we thought we were. So it is more of a pleasing situation, but we will need to track it each quarter to see if that lower figure stays. Because of what Dave's explained there, that a young person who offends once in one quarter, then the next quarter gets counted several times. It should track at a slightly lower rate going forward, because we had one particular quarter that was very high, that was sort of giving us increased figures for following quarters as well, because the way it's calculated. It's a very, very complicated way of calculating something. So apologies if we're not explaining it really clearly to the committee. But if anyone is interested, we could share you the government source of where the information comes from if anyone wants to look at it in more detail.
Yeah, I would welcome that. Can we organise that, Jonathan? Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for that. And I feel a lot more reassured, because I was really concerned on the 51 figure, that's the 51% figure, that we've actually reached a stage where we've got a hard core of young people who are reoffending, and the enforcement and the education measures that we put in place just weren't working. But from what you're saying is they are working. So I feel a lot more reassured as a ward councillor and as a member of this committee. I haven't got anybody else wishing to speak. I haven't notified. So I'd like to thank both Dave and Martin for your attendance today. Thanks very much, and it is a lot more reassuring, and the other figures with regards to custody and the diversionary activities are a lot more reassuring as well. So thanks very much for your attendance, guys, and hopefully we'll get an update report. And again, that is for the recommendation is for notification and for commenting accordingly. So I think we've done that. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
With that, we'll go to item 9, which is the County Durham and Darlington Hate Group action group, and we have Jean Trotter, who is the Policy Lead Officer of the Police and Crime and Victims Commissioner, who is going to present this report.
Morning all. I'm trying to put my camera on, but I'm having network problems, so if I get that, I'll try turning the camera off first. So morning, thanks David for that introduction, Councillor Boyce. So the hate crime report you have a copy of, and I thought that what I would do is just take you through that. The executive summary there just outlines some of the things that are covered in a bit more detail in the report. And at this point, we're just asking the committee members to take note and give us any comments back on it. I would just like to say that this, the hate crime group, is a group that my team have only very recently picked up and started facilitating. And so what we've tried to do is kind of review the process there. So a lot of the work that we're suggesting has only just started. But obviously we're wanting to pick up on the excellent work that's already being done to date. So if I can just maybe, we've included a little bit of the background there in the report, just so that we can explain why we're making some changes and where we're hoping to go with that. So you'll see that the Hate Crime Action Group was formed in November 2013, so it's been going now for about 7 years. And when it was established, it was agreed that the responsibility areas would be that we would hold service providers to account and oversee the delivery of initiatives to address hate crime. So further on in the report, we'll go through some of the stuff that's been done to achieve that. But in terms of moving forward, you'll see that what we've done really is had a good look at the terms of reference for that group. We've recently reviewed it. And we've revised it, and that now the group we're looking for it to have a bit of a wider remit. We've looked at the membership of it in order to make the actual group that meets a little bit more strategic, but we wanted to keep also our sort of SPOCs, our single points of contact, so that we can pick up pieces of sort of task and finish work and include those people in it. So you'll see there that in terms of the terms of reference for the group, we've identified there 5 new areas. So we want to start collecting, collating and analysing intelligence. So I think that's quite an important change from when the group was first established, because what we're wanting to pull together really is a data set of performance indicators. That has been agreed but hasn't been started working on yet. I would hope maybe the next time we report back that we'll be able to give you that performance data. There's been discussions about it, and that data will be part of the Safe Durham Partnership performance pack going forward, and it obviously gives us that baseline for the future. We have agreed coordinated action we want to agree coordinated actions to address the identified patterns and trends once we've picked them up from the performance data. Very high on the agenda is a zero tolerance approach to hate crime going forward. We want to include consequences for the perpetrators, so that we include that part of the work within the group going forward. Just as important that we challenge the offenders and work with them as it is that we develop those pathways to support the victims. And I think that the other important part for me is that rather than overseeing, we've included in there something about the commissioning of services, so that whole aspect of plan, do, review, that we are actually part of that in terms of identifying the kinds of services that are needed going forward. So that's the aims of the group have remained the same and will remain there as a priority, that we tackle and reduce hate crime, ensuring victims are supported at all stages of the criminal justice process, safeguarding and supporting vulnerable people and communities.
Jean, we can see our list. We've read our list, Pip. If you can just get to
all right.
What the proposals are, with the greatest respect. We say we've read this, we can read this ourselves.
All right. Sorry, I was just wanting to highlight the changes that had been made. Okie doke. So the I'll not go through that then I'll just let you know that so the action plan, if we focus on that then going forward, is that okay,
yeah.
Councillor Boys?
Yeah,
so the plan was launched in October 2018, and there's a number of progress things that are identified there going forward. So there was the development of a multi-agency communication strategy that has been developed. It's in place now. It includes regular updating and promotion of the Hate Hurts website, producing and making available a variety of promotional materials, and a joint approach to publicising and promoting the issues. The reporting mechanisms and pathways, again, they have been reviewed, as was in the action plan. And I think what's picked up from there is there are quite a lot of agencies out there who are supporting hate crime, to the police and other agencies. I think what we picked up was we just need to kind of be clear about what those pathways are and share those. We're looking at, it has been looked at how intelligence is shared, another really important part, that each organisation understands what the other's doing. So you'll see that the Force Information Management Improvement Manager, they're currently looking at the community safety information sharing agreements so that we can improve that. Then we've looked at evidence to ensure prosecutions. So again, that piece of work is being led by the Crown Prosecution Service, and that's about because we noticed from the figures that quite a lot of cases don't go ahead because the victim's unwilling to proceed. So we need to look at how we can more proactively use the evidence to ensure those prosecutions. And last but not least is that we need to map support for victims and identify the gaps. And there has been a mapping exercise completed then. Again, as previously, quite a lot of support agencies out there, but the referral pathways are not always clear. So that'll be a piece of work going forward to make sure that we've got those referral pathways in place. And I'll pick up any questions that I can answer.
Right, okay, thanks very much for that, Jane. And this was something that Ron Hogg very much supported, the Hate Crime Action Group. So hopefully this is going to sort of mean we can start to tackle a lot of these issues that was mentioned in the opening of the report. I'll bring in anybody from the committee. I've got Councillor Charlton, Joyce Charlton.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. I've recently had to be involved with a resident who's been a victim of hate crime. What I found quite not disturbing, that's the wrong word, but frustrating, was that it took over 2 weeks for the police to actually come out and interview him, and he had CCTV evidence of the incident. So for him, who has multiple problems, it was a cut and dried sort of incident that could have been resolved quite quickly, but it's still ongoing and it's weeks down the line. Is that normal?
So I would like to think it wasn't. It's really difficult to comment on a very specific case, but if you'd like to forward me any details that you can, I'd be more than happy to kind of look into it and find out what it was. The normal procedure would be, as with any case really, that there's an assessment based on how quickly the force will go out, you know, whether they'll try and deal with it over the phone, whether they'll send a visit immediately, or whether they will sort of diary an appointment. But I'm not quite sure why in this particular case it's taken 2 weeks, and why it can't be pushed forward. COVID is having an impact, obviously, on the courts and how quickly things are going through the courts. But in that case, I'm more than happy to have a look at it and come back to you with a bit more detail.
Right, thanks very much. I didn't want to make it specific, but I just wondered if, in general, was that the normal procedure, that it would take, you know, so many weeks to just get things moving, really.
Yeah. It's a valid point you raise, Joyce, and I would ask, is there a KPI with regards to responding to hate crime people who's had reports? I don't know if there is. I've never seen one, with specifically to hate crime reports, or is it just in general?
Right. Thanks very much anyway.
Maybe you can look at that, Jane, yeah?
I will do. I'll happily take it away. I haven't seen a very specific KPI around hate crime in general. Clearly the force have got KPIs in terms of how quickly they respond to all incidents. But again, I can look into it, and it is something that we could pick up in the hate crime group if it's an issue.
Can I ask what sort of buy-in there is from other agencies with regards to hate crime, Jane, and whether there is buy-in or whether, to a certain extent, it's less of a priority than other priorities, if you know what I mean?
So we have good buy-in as part of the hate crime group from all the different criminal justice agencies. So certainly the Crown Prosecution Service, the courts, the force, all have a seat around that table. I think for me, one of the reasons why we want to review the terms of reference in the membership is to make sure that we've got buy-in at the right strategic level from all of those different organisations. It's certainly also on the agenda of the Local Criminal Justice Board, and the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners have just done a piece of work around identifying inequalities in the justice process, and that's kind of being taken forward to the National Criminal Justice Board to look at and do some work around. So it is high on people's agenda. I think in terms of this group, the changes that we're hoping to make in terms of the membership and having a proper performance framework that we can report back on will help to kind of focus it more thoroughly in people's minds.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I haven't been notified anybody else wishing to speak. I think Councillor Charlton Joyce mentioned about somebody that she'd had a contact with. It took too long for them to get the police to get out to investigate it, and I asked about buy-in. So if you can sort of take those away with you, Jane, that and we maybe get a report again in a few months. And again, that was for notification and comments. Okay, thanks very much, Jane. Thank
you.
No problem. Item 10 on the agenda is any other business. We haven't been notified of any, but I'd just like to thank the committee for their contributions today. It's been very, very comprehensive reports we've had, and we've gotten through 3 reports. I think just about everybody on the committee's commented about one thing or another. So thanks very much. It is a strange way of working, but I think we're getting through the business very well. So thanks very much, and we'll see you again in the next time. And thanks for Jonathan for your support and the people who did the reports. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you.